Welcome to the June webinar today. We need to talk about data culture. My name is Lydia Brand. I'm one of the client partnership managers at Cynozure. Today, I'll actually just be monitoring our chat, answering any questions that you might have as we go along. I've got a tiny bit of housekeeping before we dive into today's content, but we would really love to hear from you. Maybe perhaps tell us where you're dialing in from. Share with us any insights or comments as we go through the session today in the chat. And you've also got the Q&A function, so please use that as much as possible as we go along the conversation. Okay, then a little bit about us at Cynozure. So we're a data and AI strategy company. We help organisations to achieve tangible business outcomes from our data and AI investments. Our work falls across the full data and AI spectrum. So anything from strategy to the people, process and culture behind that, all the way through to technology, the engineering and AI that makes that happen. So you can see from the nature of our work, it is quite varied. But one thing that underpins all of that is that we make sure that organisations that we work with will see real impact and outcomes that support operational and commercial excellence. And we do this with a broad range of clients across sectors. So you can see a couple on the screen. Yeah, nice. I'm seeing people using the chat function. So yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate your engagement. So in the room with us today presenting their real world experience and the points of view, we've got Jason Foster, founder and CEO of Cynozure, and a strategist, advisor and speaker working at the intersection of data, AI and business. He's got particular focus on helping organisations turn data and AI investments into measurable commercial impact. He's the co-author of Data Means Business, which is a practical guide for leaders developing data strategies that create real value and scale. And he's actually also the host of the Hub and Spoke podcast, which explores leadership, culture, technology, and change in the data and AI era. Jason also founded the CDO Hub, which is a global members community for senior leaders, and has been recognised as one of the top 100 most influential people in data. And we're really, really excited to have Leanne Lynch also joining us for this conversation. She is the CIO at ISS. So she's the Chief Information Officer, where she leads the organisation's technology strategy, driving innovation, cyber resilience and digital transformation across the business. With extensive experience spanning aviation, FMCG, mobile and internet industries, as she previously served as Director of Technology and Cyber Defence at Heathrow Airport. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining. And Jason, Justin, over for you. Jason, over to you.
Great, thanks Lydia, and pleasure to have you all here. Thank you so much for coming along and putting all your comments in the chat, seeing some familiar names I know. Hi to those that I know, and welcome to some new faces and new names that are maybe listening to us for the first time. So pleasure to talk to you. And this topic of data culture is a really interesting one. It's become popular mainly, we think, because, and what we see is because organizations are frustrated, actually. They're frustrated that the solutions that they built aren't getting adopted, or they're frustrated that budget isn't getting approved, or they're frustrated that buy-in from senior leaders or the broader organization isn't there, and people aren't engaging with data in a way that drives what people are trying to create, which is a culture of using data in their organization. And that frustration is diagnosed as a culture problem often. And we think that's a misdiagnosis. And the real issue is that we tend to find is that people aren't connecting the work they do in data and AI and the investments they make to the business outcomes, the decisions, the ways of working that really drive transformational change inside of the business in its day-to-day working and in the strategy that it sets. Culture is essentially an outcome of if you get that right. And I'm looking forward to talking about this topic a bit more with you guys today. And data culture has become a big conversation. And in a report that we put out earlier this year, there were three big things that stood out to me that relate to data culture. So one was that the biggest blocker that people have for progress in data and AI is a lack of buy-in. The second is that 85% of people aren't quantifying any kind of financial impact or impact at all of the data and AI investments that they're making. And the third is that 87% haven't scaled data and AI solutions across the organization. So have done some work, but haven't been able to scale that consistently at the right level across the organization. And we see this as a predictable, some of those issues are predictable, and these barriers that we've seen that came through in the report are barriers that we see regularly talking to clients and organizations about, those that are sort of struggling with either setting a strategy or trying to create the culture that they need. So these barriers of focus and prioritization difficult, people are solving the wrong problems, technology is a bit disconnected between business teams, sometimes ownership isn't clear and is could be fragmented, often adoption, and this is one that comes up when people talk about culture, and behavior change is quite hard to produce, and the impact can't be demonstrated. So these stats and metrics that we saw in our report, and these barriers that we often see in creating a culture that people want, lead to this challenge. And therefore, in the same report, 43, it was the top priority for data leaders going into this year, was data culture and literacy. So it's driven by these things that we've seen, and it's become a top priority because people are trying to they're trying to solve this challenge of frustration. They're trying to solve this challenge of how do we get an organization behind the idea of becoming one that uses data to help drive its decision making. Lydia.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, Leanne, it's really, really great to have you along for this discussion. Why do you feel like data culture's become such a dominant topic?
I think a lot of it is covered in those previous slides. It's when it comes to data and AI, and I say this quite glibly, I think the tech is the easy part of the journey. Yeah. Putting technology in place is relatively straightforward. Getting people to adopt it and trust it is where you have to really focus on growing that culture. And that culture, that data culture, and that acceptance of the value that people can get from using the tools needs to be built on trust. And we all know what the positive outcome, when we see it working, whether it's just in one part of your business or if you've got to the point where it's across all your business, where it works is where you start to see business decisions being made on the back of trusted data that's come from source systems, and not this flurry of Excel spreadsheets and stories around the numbers. And so I think organizations know where they want to get to, which is, being able to take decisions and move forward and understand what has happened, why has it happened, how do we avoid it, on trusted data. And I think everyone knows that that's what they want, but getting there is the challenge, because you're moving hearts and minds, and it's much bigger than just putting in the technology.
Yeah, it's really, really good point, particularly around the sort of the business decisions driving that. Why would you say maybe data culture is so important to ISS specifically?
For us at ISS, I look after UK and I. We are a large global organisation, so globally we're around 350,000 people. Within the UK and I, we're around 28,000 people, and that's sat across 127 strategic accounts. And our customers sit in a variety of sectors. So if you don't know anything about ISS UK and I, we are an integrated facilities management organisation. We basically support the built environment. So in hospitals, where we partner with hospitals, it will often be our teams that do the patient feeding, we'll do the portering. In offices, it's the workplace experience, the engineering, the cleaning. And so the access we have to data and the built environment is phenomenal. But if we don't get the culture right, which is people understanding their individual role in capturing that data once at source, so that we can then aggregate that up to an enterprise level to understand how we're performing, how we can better inform our customers, how we can influence the built environment, then, without that culture, we won't be able to really drive forward those decisions. So it is really about not the dashboards, not the the analytics. It's about each and every person understanding their role in that data journey.
Yeah, really, really lovely summary of that. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Leanne. It's so we've got the stats that prove people are interested in data culture. We've got these consistent themes that we see talking to hundreds of organizations, and then you're at the sharp end of trying to create this culture and it being important to not just the data initiative, but the business as a whole. I think sort of sings true about why data culture is such an important topic in our world. So it's important. There's a question then about, well, how do we go about this? How do we go about creating the data culture? And we see a few patterns emerge. And as I said at the start, there's often a sort of a misdiagnosis that that's the place to focus, but it's certainly the right intent. The right intent is there to create the kind of organization, the kind of environment that Leanne just talks about. So we see a few patterns. So this is pattern number one, and pattern number one is the fairly typical one now. It's organizations have built platforms, they built the dashboards that Leanne just mentioned. They've launched that platform and told people about it and said, look at these great tools that we've got. Here's this great platform over here. They then see a sort of drop off or low usage, limited adoption, and then the fix to that after the fact is to go and run a culture program to try and get the organization to better adopt the tools that have been built, to explain to people the value of the tools, to explain why data is important, to explain what insights can create, to train and educate people on those things. It's sort of an after effect, because for some reason the approach taken to building platforms and driving adoption hasn't led to the culture that people are craving, or the value being produced off the back of the sort of technology work that you like. This is very consistent, and very transparently, we often go into conversations at sort of like arrow 3. We say, well, we've done everything, we've made the investments, we want to try and now drive the right culture. Can you help? We often get in on box 1 as well, but lots of conversations over the last few years have been, we've tried some stuff and it's still not working. So we think culture is the problem, and we go in and lift the lid and find out if that really is the challenge or not. So that's pattern number 1. Pattern number 2 is people are like, aha, I've heard this before. I know there's a problem. If we leave culture and training and all the rest of it to after we built everything, we might be too late, and we might not get through the investment. We might get more investment we need if we leave sort of trying to create that culture later. So we do it early. So they launch training, education, engagement, exec sessions, put people through boot camps and training programs on the tools, on why being data guided and data driven is important, run culture change programs, communication, then start going, okay, now we've got a bit of groundswell, people get this, we're going to start building platforms, building the dashboards that are needed, try and tap into the people that came off the back of those programs and liked what they saw, became sort of champions. And then they also can see low usage and adoption to those tools. And it's often because we make an assumption that the change in culture will create the behaviors that we want, which will automatically mean people focus on the things that are most valuable. But culture isn't a starting point. As I said at the start, culture is often an outcome that you achieve by changing the way that you work. So this pattern hasn't worked in many instances as well. Now, the third one is do all of that. Throw the kitchen sink at it. Let's build the technology, the platforms, the dashboards, the analytics, roll out the AI, do some proof of concepts, but at the same time, launch the transformation program that drives this big change that we want to get everyone on board. But because we're building at the same time, we can start to kind of try and tie those two things together and create almost like a pincer movement on the organization, with that top-down culture and communication and change agenda, with the bottom-up platform and tools development and those sorts of things. Now, the challenge with this one is you get a bit transformation overload. You get a little bit fatigued. There's a bit of too much going on at once. We're trying to tell everyone everything, and it starts to cause a bit of fatigue, a bit of overload with the amount of change that's going on. So the third pattern, throw everything at it, is the one that sort of feels like the right thing to do. We see big corporates doing this, big multinationals, because they often have the appetite and momentum to try and do that. But And the reason that organizations end up talking about data culture in all of these situations is, again, because they're frustrated. They're either frustrated because they know there's a problem that could be coming. They're frustrated because they've invested in something and it hasn't delivered the results that they want. They've built these things, they've launched this stuff, but impact and value isn't clear across the organization. And we can't explain why value hasn't been created. So we go, well, it must be culture. It must be people don't get this. But let's go and help people understand. But Leanne was saying this, at the end of the day, the CEO, the business leaders in an organization, they don't really care about dashboards as such. They don't really care about, the technology. They don't really care about the great data management initiative that's been put in place. What they care about is growth and cost and risk and driving the agenda and delivering products and services to the customers, to customer outcomes and customer experience. So the reason that the challenge tends to manifest itself is because it's not because culture's failed, it's because we haven't made the link between the things that the business leaders care about, cost, growth, all those things, and the work that we do. And it's the biggest pattern that we see over and over again is we try and treat data culture as this thing that we need to try and implement rather than changing the way we think about data culture so that we drive to the most impactful outcomes that the organization cares about. Leanne and Lydia, it'll be great to hear a bit about your views on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Leanne, in your experience, does this resonate, and what have you seen go wrong when creating a culture around
I can tell
data?
you, this is where I could get really excited, and I'm going to keep my eye on you so you can go, come on, we've got more to do. Otherwise, I could literally take days on this. I have the first pattern you put up, been there, done it. About 10 years ago, I remember data was becoming a really big thing. Cloud was becoming a really big thing. How do you create these wonderful data lakes where you can get all this information? And made the decision at the time to go, the business are going to quickly understand how to use this and how to show value of it. I want to get IT off the critical path. So let's build the capability. Let's build this beautiful lake with the right pipes and the right inflows and some wonderful governance, and they shall come. Fast forward 2 years later, and they were still going, what? So I've been there, right? And you make these decisions with all the right information at the right time. Equally, I found where maybe you've got slightly more awareness of what it actually means to be a data-led organization, and you're trying to do more than one thing at the same time. So that, when you're trying to land the culture, the continue to build the lake and all of that. And I think through all of it, it comes back to, because I genuinely believe that data, and I don't know who's on the call, so I don't know how many whether I'll trigger people, doesn't belong to the CIO and it doesn't belong to the CDO. It belongs to the organization. And so when I look at those patterns, the thing that I have learnt and I've taken away from probably making the bingo card of all the mistakes over the 18 odd years that I've really loved and had the opportunity to work with data and data strategies and data, all of the wonderful buzzwords, is that it comes down to, for me, operational discipline. And I mean that overall. Every individual, I think I said it in answer to your last question, if you want data to work, to be able to map it all together, it comes down to the person who's generating your data, understanding their role in it. So it's almost like this bottom-up, top-down approach, yeah? The CLT, the exec, need to make data-led decisions, be informed and know that when they get presented with information, it is trusted, that it comes from source, that they can move forward with it. So you've got that push coming down, but coming up, you've got to help people who create data. And from my organization, this could be an engineer, it could be a cleaner. I need them to understand their role in that and start to push it up. So yes, those patterns very much resonated with me. I think I could probably tick off in my career where I have tried various approaches and seen the consequences of where, it's taken a couple of years for people to use the technology that I've put in place. And, it costs money to run a data lake. It's an investment. And even when you're not heavily using it, it's a bit like having a very posh car in the garage, if you like that analogy, all the way through to trying to do it all at once. And people in the end just go, it's too much, right? It's too much. So yeah, so that's I can definitely resonate.
Yeah, fantastic. Where would you, I guess, say, just following on from that, where do you feel like organised struggle most? Do you feel like it's the data itself, it's tooling, leadership behaviours, people's confidence?
Oh my goodness, I think it's a combination of it all. If you try and separate it out, you are always going to leave one behind and struggle. And each one of those elements you've said, Lydia, need to be true. Yeah. So you have to have a case for change, a case for investment. And that investment isn't just in the technology, but it's in the training, it's in everything else that goes around it. You then have to realise that I think, for me, all four of those have to become true. One of the things that I personally have found is people not necessarily understanding the effort, the organised and the enterprise effort required to go on the journey and keep all four of those aligned. Yeah. And if you try and tackle the whole enterprise all at once, you almost go back to that last pattern that Jason showed. So it is that, do people understand that data, and I use terrible analogies, my team tell me, so you just have to bear with me. It is not a lazy man's crop. It is not something you just put there and go, oh, I'm going to do this, and it maintains itself. It is a constant living entity that requires constant check-in, constant validation, to ensure that it's trusted and move forward. So I wouldn't say it was any one of those four individually. I would say it is the enterprise understanding of what it means if you are a brownfield company, and by that I mean you're established and everything, and you are needing to build forward. That is a big enterprise shift that requires everyone to align.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. I finished the last section saying that we sort of think about culture in a slightly wrong way and treat it as this separate thing that we're trying to create. And you articulate so nicely there about, we've got to drive this through the operations. We've got to make sure that this is important and clear and understood by the people that are really impacted by it. And I suppose the sort of broader point, and why culture is seen as the medicine, if you like, to fixing a lot of this, is because things haven't worked, and we're worried about them not working, or we've seen them not work before. And instead of aligning around those points that Leanne just made, we see organizations trying to kind of force a culture on an organization that doesn't quite understand, and isn't quite engaged with the conversation in the way that we want. And as I said at the end of the last sort of section, was that the way we try and do that is to embed the impact and the value that we want to try and create at the heart of our approach to delivering this kind of like change initiative, and make sure that we understand that value up front, make sure that value gets implemented along the way, and that we're focused on it, and make sure that that value and that impact is measured and communicated towards the end of the process that you're going through. And this is an ongoing cyclical process, so there are multiple touch points on that. So the headline really around where we go with this is to say that that we have to focus on, instead of data culture as such, we have to focus on the things that can create understandable and measurable impact in the organization. That's the kind of the heartland of this, and the heartland of the pivot that I'm trying to get people to understand in terms of how they approach this. So rather than treating data culture as something separate, we need to find a way of embedding the conversation into things that people truly care about. So if my positioning of sort of data culture not being the answer, well, what should it be? What should we focus on, and how should we focus on it? And there's these kind of principles that have served us very well in supporting organisations like Leanne's, and lots of our other clients, which underpin how we think about this whole space. And these are, if you like, the philosophy behind rather than sort of practical actions. So the philosophy behind the work that we find drives culture change without running a culture change program are these things. So starting with business decisions is the number one. It's really being clear and understanding the strategic objectives of the organization and what decisions need to be made and driven and reported on. And also the operational day-to-day, or all the way to the other end, the operational day-to-day decisions that people or agents or systems are making that actually deliver on whatever the outcome of the organization is, either some financial return or some improved I don't know, income for a charity or better citizen health in a local authority or something. So being really clear on what the strategic and operational intent of the organization is, and using that to drive everything else. So first fundamental principle, if you like, of the approach of driving a culture is basically making it about things that people genuinely care about, which is the things that they do day to day at the most strategic level and the most operational level. The second thing is on focusing on meaningful change, and what that means is that we want to build things and put in initiatives that drive improvements in the way we make decisions, in the behaviors that people have, in the outcomes that they deliver, not just focusing on the deliverables that we're trying to produce. Because the deliverables that we're trying to produce are just essentially a means to an end, and that end will be different depending on the organization and what these business decisions are that we need to make. So the meaningful change, there's generally a meaningful change required, and that's always been true in data and insights to drive better customer retention. We tend to need to do something different than we've done before if we've got a problem with customer retention, as an example. But certainly when we think about AI and agentic AI, and I know this is called data culture, but it's similar and rings true in the AI space as well. There's a lot of meaningful change that can take place, all the way from flipping a business model to rethinking and re-architecting business processes. The third is adopting a product mindset, and we have a whole separate kind of track on the idea of product management, treating data as a product and solutions as products, because it's the mechanism that allows you to build, continuously improve, iterate and learn, and an ongoing development of a product in the way that a supermarket would manage and run a product, or a manufacturing firm would manage and run a product. So thinking of the solutions we build as entities in their own right that have metrics, have KPIs, have an owner, and we care about improving and iterating. The fourth is where we start to really understand whether any of this is working. And we have to measure, we have to know what our intent is, we have to know what we're trying to improve customer retention in my example before, and then we have to measure whether the products that we build are improving customer retention. So it demonstrates progress, but it also buys a story internally that means you can articulate why this thing is important. And when you can do that, people start to understand, people start to get it, people start to buy in, people start to believe it. And the third thing is pretty obvious, but doesn't always happen, is that this intelligence that we build, these data or AI products that we roll out, need to be used. They can't just be built. They can't just be proof of concepts. They can't just be demos that we put together. They have to be genuinely impactful, embedded products into the way we work. So these are kind of, these are principles, and they can all turn into practical actions, but these are the principles that underpin how you really start to drive a data culture without running a data culture program. But they can be turned into sort of practical things as well. So they're principles that underpin what we do, but it's also a practical framework, or they underpin the practical framework that gives us a way of working that starts to do some of the things that Leanne was talking about, but starts to embed these principles in our approach to delivering data, insights, AI into an organization. And we've got these four categories that are independent, but I should say interdependent, and each of them are important to drive the agenda. So business alignment, so it takes all those things that I said about knowing the business problems that you want to solve, knowing the decisions that you want to make, and really understanding, are we solving for the right problems? So if you're building a data platform, do you know which things it's going to fix? Is it going to fix retention? Is it going to improve operations? Is it going to help you deliver more products and services? Is it something that's helping drive customer interactions and customer behavior? And do the people that are responsible for those things in marketing and sales and supply chain and finance and HR also on board with solving those problems and engage with you in a way that they understand that that's the problem that we're looking to fix and focus our attention on? The second thing is platforms and products, and this is the easy one to focus on. It's building things, but this is about, are we building the right products and the right platforms that allow us to solve the business challenges, the operational improvements that we need. So not just a generic platform, a generic set of tools that everyone can use, but things that we genuinely know can build once and use many maybe, that solve genuine business needs and business challenges. The third is then, are we able to scale, and are we able to get this used across an organization? So back to the learning earlier and the about only, what was it, 87% can't and haven't scaled. And also the principle of these things have to be used and adopted. That's not necessarily just by one person in one team, but if we've got a thing that works and can be applied consistently in lots of different areas, then we need a mechanism for doing that. We need to make sure we've got the right governance around it. We need to make sure we've got the right prioritization, that we're driving the right change at the right time. So we need to have the right approach to use. We need to have the right approach to scale the products and platforms that we build, all linked back to the business problems that we've articulated. And then the final one is about measurement. So can we prove the impact? And we can only prove impact generally if we knew what we were trying to achieve. We can get lucky and deliver some value, but actually we need to know what value we're looking to deliver. We need to track, monitor, measure it, and make sure that not only can we prove it, but that we can improve the return. So if we were 5% before, can we get it to 6, 7, 8% using these tools, using these products that we've built? And to touch on a point I made before, this measurement and capturing the almost internal case studies for where this has been successful builds the momentum, builds the understanding, gives a narrative internally to articulate what the point of all this stuff was, because there's certainly no point of doing it all if it doesn't deliver any value. So really, we're talking about sort of changing the approach and changing the thinking from building technology, rolling it out, training people, hoping we get value, hoping we get people bought in, hoping that we've got a culture, and then sort of going around that loop multiple times to try and convince people that this thing's good, to focusing entirely on the outcomes that we're looking to achieve, building products that are embedded into the way people work, the way people operate, the way people do their job day to day, learn what works, test, iterate, and improve it, and then measure the impact and go again. That's how we change culture in our experience, and that's how we really drive a much more effective and slick process in driving the culture that we're looking for and the value and impact that we're looking to make. So Leanne and Lydia, it'd be great to kind of get some views from the front line on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Really liked all the points you raised. Yeah, Leanne, what examples do you have that you might be able to share with us about approaching data and AI in this way?
I think Jason thrown me with hope. That feels the one word. If anyone says, how do you describe your role in one word? Hope is it.
Fingers crossed and pray. Yeah.
So no, it kind of threw me a bit. It made me giggle. Look, so as Jason said, we've are working with you and your teams on this. Now, I myself come from strongly believe in a product mindset, not just for data, but across the patch, to the point that I often, my business stakeholders, my other functional stakeholders, I will visualize their department as a product because it's continually evolving, it's continually changing. And so I'm a huge believer of the product mindset and being able to apply it and get value of it. I think what really made us gel very well with Cynozure is that, focusing on the outcomes, because the cost of taking data and making it go live, we can't shy away from. It is a big investment piece, and you can't afford, to your point, Jason, to just invest in vanilla tools and hope for the best, and hope people will engage it. You've got to kind of ask the question, what is it is going to drive value? And when we did it here, we we had a series of challenges as an enterprise that we really wanted to work through and understand, how could we move faster in a particular area? How can we drive better efficiencies? And so the business outcome was huge. And what we did was actually scale that down to a single product. A single product that if we were able to define it correctly with the operators, the people who have to live this product day by day and get that definition right, we could show some value. And everyone was like, yeah, but that's just one part. When I looked at the problem statement, there was a contractual element, there was, a work element, there was a customer element, there were all of these different elements, but we scaled it back down to one product. And we took that one product and the team sat down with the people on the ground, the operators. These are people that don't often have the luxury of sitting in front of a laptop, but the data we got back from them was essential in understanding this. And we defined it. We then took that back into the rest of the exec and we said, this is their understanding, what's your understanding? And then we got into this healthy discussion of, oh yeah, but it's different for different contracts. But that's a different product. Oh, yeah, we're not trying to solve everything. We're trying to get this one definition right. And then when you've got this right, we can then define contracts, and that will be a product that will work with it. So it's been a real journey and one that we are still on. So we took that one product and then we defined our build on it. And again, the build the remit was, we can't go too big. We cannot have a technology investment that has a negative impact on our revenue, our margins. Yeah, so it has to be relative to what we're building. So the technology was quietly built in the background as we went through. We then piloted it. And where we piloted it in 2 accounts, we were then able to show what it has to be true within the operational organisation, the finance team, all the teams, to ensure that that product was maintained and delivered the outcome we wanted. And what was missing, and why in a particular account we couldn't get value from that product because they didn't perform a particular process step, or a bit of information or a field was missing from a key source system. And so building that story meant that I never had one conversation about the dashboard and what did it look like, and was I using AI, and was it Power BI or whatever. It was all around this one time, and I'm very visual, but it was a tiny product. And within one phase, so 3 months, we took this product, we built the pilot, and then we handed it over to a business as usual team who now are taking that one product and getting value across our top 10, 20 accounts. That's just one tiny piece of data in an organization. I wouldn't even want to know the scale of products we could wind up with. The other thing is it was achievable. So rather than trying to fix all the foundations, so I very much visualize in a pyramid, all the foundations, everybody put in the right data in the right system, and all the systems were upgraded to move to the differentiators at the bottom. We took one tiny potential differentiator and just took off a slice of the pie, and people got speed to value within 3 months. And that was the difference. Now, I'm in a slightly different situation. They go, well, we'll do it more and do it bigger. And then they go, oh, but we also have to be there, and we have to have the capacity to do more, to do bigger. So we're now moving forward at pace. But again, people, as we engage the operations, they now understand their role in create. And when I say operations, I mean all functions outside of mine. They understand their role in that data product. And it's not unachievable, and it doesn't feel unmanageable because they are dealing with it piece by piece. Meanwhile, those in the teams who are, really analytical, our data, true data in their core, can start to see the puzzle, these data products being built, and they can start to see, wow, the potential of what they can do when it comes to, foresighting and understanding how to get ahead of problems. They can start to see that build. So we're at an exciting sort of point where everybody wants more of that one product faster. And at the same time, they're beginning to realize that it is a enterprise responsibility in order to deliver it. So that's where we are at the moment. Hopefully that's given you a bit of insight and just shows that, you know, that speed to value is what senior people want, and it is one way to get there while keeping their engagement and their trust in the process and the investment that we need to make.
If I take that back, Lydia, I think all those things are so important. And I've seen some of the conversation happening in the chat. You know, none of that really is about, you haven't talked about creating a culture, data culture. You've talked about doing things that help solve problems for the people that are, you know, front line of running the business and supporting clients. And they're things that people care about. And when people care about something, they engage, they lean in. When they can see the value to them, they engage, they lean in. When it's solving a problem that they have, they engage and lean in. That's the culture that you're trying to create. And so we don't try and create it by telling them what it needs to be. We create it by approaching this in a slightly different way that I've talked about. So all the sort of conversation, which I think is great, about, well, how do we define a data culture and what does it need to look like? It's actually kind of almost focusing on the conversation slightly the wrong way around. And if we start to think about it in terms of impact we're looking to drive, value we're looking to deliver, the culture will come off the back of that. And Leanne's given some great examples of where that's worked for her. Now imagine if we did, you know, that, you know, scaled that approach and took that one small data product and scaled that across all of the different areas of the organization. Imagine if we delivered value in each sort of piece in the right way. And in some organizations that we've worked with, we've seen, just short time, so I'm going to flick through these, but we've seen some really fantastic results in terms of not focusing on building platforms, delivering dashboards, creating a data culture, but focusing on solving a problem. And in this logistics example, they had a margin challenge. Increased energy prices were making it cost more to run their operations, and they had this gap, and they needed to look at ways of solving that. And through some mechanisms of pricing, some smart pricing for renewals and their customers through a data-driven approach, we managed to help support the delivery of 7.9% increase in revenue. And it was something like 100 times return on the investment they made on us in terms of what they got back. So that was a problem to solve that they needed. The other way I could have told that story is we got brought into an organization to build a data warehouse, to build some dashboards, to build a data culture, to sort out the data management, and that would have been great, but it wouldn't have had the power and the message of we've actually transformed what was a potentially bad performance from a financial point of view in that organization. Again, charity, we helped secure 15 million funding by solving some technical challenges where they were non-compliant with what they needed in order to secure the funding from the NHS. An entertainment business, again, by yes, building a platform and dashboards and insights and models and all that good stuff, but actually it was about how do we get more of our customers to buy from us direct rather than through quite a fractured ticket sales process in the entertainment business. And they saw a 120% increase in ticket sales by using a sort of a data-driven approach. Now, by doing that regularly and consistently in these organizations, they now have a data culture, but we've never had to talk to them about creating one. They just have it because the things that we've built, the approach we've taken to building it have been about solving the problems that they really care about. So I think this is about reframing what how we approach the conversation and the topic of data culture. So the first reframe as a sort of conclusion is instead of trying to improve data culture, we want to be creating business impact or some business value in some way, and culture will follow. The second is instead of thinking about specific projects to do data management or implement Snowflake or some other platform or projects that have a defined start and end point, it's about building an evolving set of products that iterate and improve and evolve as they're used and learnings come to the fore through the people that are actually implementing and executing business change. The third reframe is instead of thinking about outputs like dashboards and insights and models, we think about driving the important outcomes that really do change behavior and change the way the organization operates. And the fourth is instead of thinking about managing and delivering data, we think about enabling the decisions that really matter, whether that's automated or by a human. Again, if we do those things, it changes the culture without ever having to talk about creating a data culture. So I'm not attacking data culture in any way. It's important, it's critical. Back to the first section, this is a big topic and really important one, but I'm attacking the assumption, probably attacking is a bit of a harsh word, but attacking the assumption that data culture is a thing that we should be optimizing for. And we think there's a better and different way to do that. So thanks very much, everyone. Lydia.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks so much, particularly Leanne and Jason, for joining us and for sharing such honest and practical perspectives. And also, really, it's appreciated seeing all of the comments in the chat, and really looking forward to connecting with you all individually at a later date. For anyone listening who wants to think about where their organisation currently stands, we'd really encourage you to take a look at our impact readiness scorecard. So you can just use the QR code in the screen to access, but it's designed to help you assess your current maturity and identify where to focus next. And we're also obviously happy to always chat through any results that you receive in a separate call. So yeah, really looking forward to seeing your scores from completing the scorecard. And yeah, thanks so much everyone for joining us, and we really hope to see you in our next session. Speak to you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you.